and to be able to sit down and have good conversations like that are really impactful to American history. And that's the work that we see from our Lynne Jackson. She works hard as the president of the Dred and Harriet Scott Foundation to go out and be an ambassador for good, for peace, and for healing. And it's an honor to watch her do that and to keep her ancestors' legacy alive. And we've been so fortunate to have that as part of the Cherry Blossom schedule now for 13 years. And today is no exception with the panel that she's put together. If you'd put your hands together and give her a good Cherry Blossom welcome, Lynne Jackson.
My fan club is sitting in the front row. Thank you. Hello and welcome, everybody. Well, yeah, today is going to be another one of those unusual things that has never happened on the planet. All new things start in Marshfield, right? So, but first I want to thank Nick and Sarah for continuing to do this. I was just saying on the way down here, I wonder if they keep saying, oh, dog, do we have to do this again? It is so much work, but it comes off so beautifully. And then I want to thank Karen in the back, because Karen has always got my back, no matter what. Thank you. Even on Zoom calls, which now I can do by myself. Thank you. And I tell you, I don't even have time to talk about this, but my family is sitting over here in front row. And that is Mitzi Hosmer, her daughters, Ann, Mary, and Sarah. And I love you guys. I'm so glad you're here. And when I say family, I really do mean we are related by marriage. So if you don't know that story, catch one of us and we'll be happy to share it. But Mitzi is how old, girls? No. Will she be 99 this fall? Oh, my God, in August. Okay, well, God bless you. This lovely, lovely lady hosted me at her house for 14 years or something crazy like that. And my friends. So anyway, thank you to you all. I also want to thank my new host family who is here today. Yes, and that's Sherry and Shelley Arnold, sitting with my beautiful daughter, Sherry. Hello, and thank you. They are just amazing. And sitting next to them is one of my most amazing volunteers, Russ Sauer. And Russ and I drove down together, and he came 4 years ago. And you guys know the bug story. You know the bug story? When you get bit by the bug in Marshfield, what do? You come back. And this is Russ's 4th year. So thank you, Russ, for everything that you do. Let's see. Then there's Dana King, who's sitting in the front row. And Dana has been with me since 2006 when we were planning things for the anniversary in 2007. We had a genealogy conference at her church in St. Louis, the Latter-day Saints Church. And she has just been stalking me ever since. I can't get rid of her. I just don't know. I don't understand it. But she's been a faithful, faithful friend. And that's one reason why we're here today, is because of Dana. So my last message, and I do see and have seen others of you out there. I can't name everybody today, but thanks for being here. I have a message from one of our old buddies. And I apologize because I had to answer the phone during the last session. I hope you didn't hear it ring. But Shannon Lanier finally called me back. And he said, hold the fort down and tell everybody I said hi. And Shannon Lanier is the 6th, I believe, great-grandson of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Heming. And typically, they try to come too, but he's in New York. So he said, tell all of you hello. So with that, I'm going to give you a very, very quick overview of the things that the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation has done in the last year or so, just the highlights, because I want to get on with our program. Last year was, I guess, the first year that I ever did not make it here. And that was so sad to me, but I didn't have any choice, because 2 years before that, I had agreed to participate and actually promoted a program to be in St. Louis called No Tears Project. And the No Tears Project is part of the Little Rock, Arkansas High School and National Park Service programs. I won't go into all of it, but it's music and art and literature. And in that program, they did write original music for Dred and Harriet Scott, and they wrote an original poem, which was performed for us also here in St. Louis a second time. So that was a big deal, and I really had to be there. That was last April. And even though this isn't about Dred Scott, but indirectly because of Dred Scott, I met this beautiful lady who just walked into my Dred Scott office one day last December of 2022. She said, "Hey, would you like to go to Israel?" And I was thrown back, and I went, "Well, yeah, but what are you talking about?" I went to Israel last year, and I got in and out before the attack. So that was for the Jerusalem prayer breakfast. I was literally a guest of the Knesset, and we were there, and it was just totally amazing. So I would have missed you all if I'd had to go to Israel too, sorry, but, you know. And then we had an amazing new monument installed in St. Louis called the Freedom Suits Memorial. And the Freedom Suits Memorial was put up by a committee, but it was led by Judge David Mason. He had always envisioned a monument to all of the people who sued for their freedom, as well as the attorneys and who helped them. So Juneteenth, the first official annual holiday for Juneteenth of 2022, we did dedicate that, and I was honored to be one of the few speakers that they had at the podium. And so it is in St. Louis. You can Google it. It's very beautiful. And somehow I didn't do this. They tricked me, really. But I'm on the board of the Freedom Suits Foundation, and so we're very busy, and it's going quite well. And then, believe it or not, we finally got our Dred Scott Monument up in St. Louis at Calvary Cemetery, and some of you were there. Have you seen it? Yes? No? Pictures? Okay, Russ, I forgot my picture. We're going to show you a picture of it. It's very, very beautiful. Dred Scott has a new 9-foot high, 10 by 10 black granite, two-sided, inscribed with his picture and scriptures and all that good stuff. Oh, yeah. Here comes Vanna White. Thank you. Okay, it's not a big picture, but I think and I hope you can see it. This just gives you an idea of what it is. It's very, very beautiful, and I'm very, very grateful. We got a grant from the Mellon Foundation to help finish off our GoFundMe that we originally instituted to get it kicked off. So that was fabulous. And Nick and Sarah were there, and we thank you for that. And then, two more things, and I'm done here. I went to New York. Do any of you remember me telling you that Charlie Tawney, the great nephew of Chief Justice Roger B. Tawney, who read the Dred Scott decision, okay, his daughter wrote a play. Remember that? And the play was about a descendant of Scott and a descendant of Tawney meeting today over coffee in a coffee shop. This play came out in 2016, and that's how I met them. I met them over a play about us meeting. And so it was fabulous. It was about 20 or 25 minutes, depending on how you ran it. And she rewrote it so that it's over an hour long now. Instead of just 2 people, it has 14 people. It has a beautiful ensemble of 6 people in the Scott family, 6 people in the Tawney family. And they're like talking to them and being their conscience and just walking through the original play. And it's really, really good. So I got a chance to go back to New York and see the new play as well. And that was really just about 6 weeks ago. So we're hoping to bring it to St. Louis, and you're not that far away. If we do, I hope you'll come up to St. Louis and see it. So the last thing, which it was quite an honor for me, was to go to Salt Lake City, Utah, and be a keynote speaker for the world's largest genealogy conference, Roots Tech 2024. And again, I thank Dana because this was all her doing. She's been working steadily behind the scenes for years, I think, just to make this happen. And even though I said I was a keynote speaker, and I was, and they treated me like a rock star, I'm not kidding you. That was sweet. It was only 12 minutes long. My God, the work that goes into a 12-minute keynote. But I tell you, as I sat on that stage, looking like a little mouse compared to the stage and those 3, I would say, 60 by 30-foot screens behind me and 6,000 people sitting in front of me and over 1 million people online. I don't know the official number, but I know it was over 1 million people. And I got to share with them about Dred Scott, about what we do, and some of the genealogy work that we do, which some of their members helped us find as well. So that was just a huge, huge thing. But one of the nice things that happened was I I was honored to be the guest at a dinner held for me. And I have to say this, when I'm going to the dinner, I'm just riding along in the back seat, and I look out the window, and I see this big sandwich board on the side of the road. It says, Lynne Jackson. I'll go, what is that? Out of the corner of my eye, I look again, there's another one. And there's a lighted one. And I'm thinking, what is this? And the Brigham Young family had invited me to dinner, which is where I was going. And all these lovely little signs were all over the street and welcoming me and leading us up to the little house. And at that little house, I was the guest of the Brigham Young descendants, one of whom is sitting here on the stage with me, and that's Rachel Leavitt. So I'm going to introduce her to you as my new friend and new member of the Sons and Daughters of Reconciliation, if you all remember who those people are. And I'm going to actually turn this over to her and let her tell you why she's with me today, her family feeling like that there's just something they need to address, something that they might want to do. And her friend, and you can say more about her later, but this is Stephanie Phillips. And they are both members of the Latter-day Saint Church, and they will share with us their hopes and aspirations for reconciliation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. I wasn't able to be at that dinner, and that made me so sad, but my family was there, and I got to watch it, and it was, but it was beautiful. Stephanie was there. And oh, you weren't there. Just kidding. She wasn't there. Dana was there.
Dana's always there.
Dana's been at everything. But my name is Rachel Leavitt. I am the great-great-granddaughter of Brigham Young, who was the second president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I came to realize, actually, after I'd met Lynne, and we went and visited your monument, that, oh, it's right there. It's beautiful. Really touching to go see. I sat at that monument, and you probably even see it. You can't see the dates on there, but I looked at those dates, and I'm like, is that the back side? Oh, it's just the back of it. On the front
That's the back side.
It lists the dates of when he lived, and I looked at him like, that is the same time period that my great-great-great-grandfather, Brigham Young, was alive. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they met each other. They were in the same place.
It's possible.
But
we'll research it.
But I did find it interesting to think both of our ancestors lived in the same culture. Well, not the same culture really, because but with the same cultural nuances, maybe perhaps that some of the decisions that were made impacted both of them greatly and impacted how they moved forward. So I just found that interesting to note. I don't know, this meant something to me there. Mm-hmm. So Brigham Young, we'll talk a little bit more about before this, but he, just so that to give a short background, he really was the first leader, president of the church to verbalize a policy that restricted African Americans' ability to fully participate in our church, and this was back in the 1850s. I didn't know a whole lot about it until a few years ago, but I mean, I've known about it for a long time, but at least really understanding the history of it. But about, I want to say a year, for a number of years, I've actually had those little inklings of something. I think probably when the same time many people in this country, as things were happening, trying to figure out life and what was going on and why things were happening. And about a year ago, it really came as I was listening to some other efforts of people doing reconciliation work. I was like, that's it. Really, we need to do some reconciliation and some healing within our family. And we'll talk a little bit about why this is an issue within our own church, but why it's important even to work on these things. So I was just really impressed to work on this. So Stephanie here is going to talk a little bit about the African Americans in the beginning of our church, and kind of just a brief introduction to that.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Phillips, and I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, with Dana.
Closer.
Closer? Oh, better. I was baptized in the church in 1992 to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And with Rachel here, I started to delve in more about African American Black Mormons. And the fact of the matter is, when this church was started in 1830, Joseph Smith said that the Lord told him to spread the gospel to all people of all colors. And it's a little-known fact that Joseph Smith had Black priesthood holders. The one that I researched the most was Elijah Abels. He was born in 1810 in Maryland, Washington County. At the age of 22, he joined the church. In 36, 37, he received the priesthood of an elder. That document was a license that they gave to the priesthood holders. Joseph Smith signed that document. Elijah Abel served 3 mission calls. You guys seen the guys going around with the little name tag saying the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Well, I don't know how long that mission call was, but Elijah Abel served 3 missions between Canada and the U.S., 3 mission calls. His last mission call was, I believe, in Ohio. He was 74 years old, from 22 to 74. He served as a Black priesthood holder in the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. He was on his mission. He got sick. He came back. He went back to Salt Lake. He died 2 weeks later on December 25th, 1884. So this is a little-known fact, even in the church history, about our Black Mormons. We have had many priesthood holders and Black members of the church that help even migrate to Utah. So, and we discussed this at, Rachel's meetings, because they learn too, as I learn, we have these people. We have Green Flake that actually tracked to Utah before the whole company went out. And so this is good to know, because we've been here all along, and we've been helping build the city of Zion for God.
Thank you. That was the beginning years, and I don't know how many of you are familiar, but our church actually was here. We didn't start in Utah. We were here. And
Here being where?
well, New York was the beginning, but we also lived here in Missouri. So there are a lot of stories within our history, but because one of the things we try to do with our group is...
I'm sorry,
Yep.
they don't know who your group is.
Okay, as part of what, as I was trying to figure out how to do this work, we began to meet as a group to have discussions, and we now call ourselves the Brigham Young Racial Reconciliation Ministry. So we hold discussions weekly now. We talk about historical things in history. We talk about really kind of just hard emotions, what that means to us. We work together to try and figure out, as family groups and African Americans and various people, to just figure out what this even means, actually, at this point. So we're just having conversations, which I will continue to talk about, because that's really foundational to what we have found with reconciliation work, at least for us. So that's one of the big things. So as I was actually looking into these stories, and that's why I had Stephanie lead, because the storytelling and being able to tell the stories of the early African Americans in the church has become actually really important to me. I think that's partially what you probably saw at Roots Tech, and they're starting to add more and more and seeing more and more the desire for African Americans to see their ancestry, to understand their stories, to understand where they came from, and to dig deeper into their history. So I recognized huge importance of that. And as I was doing this also, I found a very short story of within my own family history here in Missouri. I'm not originally from here. Well, I guess if you go way back when, I was. But I grew up in Seattle, Washington, so I've kind of come a long way. But
Where do you live?
well, right now I live in Marshall, so that's where we're at. So in between Kansas City and Columbia, if you go down the freeway. So that's where we are now. And right by, and this was an interesting thing, right by Marshall, I found there was a journal entry from a woman called Emily Dow Partridge, who later married Brigham Young. So that's who I am descended from. When she was about 11 years old, when she was about 11 years old, she was traveling up the Missouri River to visit her father, Edward Partridge, who was the first bishop in the church at that time. And it must have been cold. The journal entry talks about it, the river freezing over at Arrow Rock. Arrow Rock is about 15 minutes away from where I live right now, which is interesting to me. And they had to get off. It was her mother and 5 young children who had to get off the boat because the river had frozen over as they were trying to make it to their father. So this was a young family trying to survive. And there was not a whole lot written in this particular journal entry, but what they did say, and this touched me particularly at this time as we're working to tell African American stories, is that there was an African American family that took her and her family in, and let them stay with them in their cabin. And they waited until they were able to break the ice enough to travel back up the river again to go stay with their father. So I kind of hold that story in my heart right now because it has a lot of meaning to know that as we're trying to do reconciliation work and learn from each other, that there was a family of African American descent that was a part of my family's past in a very meaningful way. So that, as storytelling as a big part, came up and was just an important aspect for me as I was going through this discovery of what my own history was with this.
Rachel, how many relatives do you have?
Like on the Brigham Young side?
Well, just the one side, I guess. Whatever.
I mean, if you want to go back to Brigham Young, thousands and thousands. They do not all know me.
Fortunately.
And in our group, there's, I think, 5 family members so my great aunts and my dad, and then another one that is participating with this group. We've been talking to other family members too. There's a whole lot of family nuances with the Brigham Young family. So on the Brigham Young side, yes, there's thousands and thousands. I don't know, Dana, you had the number 30,000, something like that? Yeah, a lot, if you were to go back to Brigham Young. So, yeah. The impact of that family alone in terms of being able to listen to stories, I think could be huge. In either case, the members of the Latter-day Saint Church left Missouri and went to Utah. At that time, they started their own territory. There was a lot of political stuff going on at that time, and is a story in and of itself. But in 1852, Brigham Young verbalized. This was the first time that we have record of something on paper and that we know of. Brigham Young verbalized that the African Americans didn't have the ability to receive leadership positions because they were then said they couldn't have the priesthood, which is what entails a leadership position within the church. Which is why it's important for Stephanie to note that we did have those initially, that was not restricted initially. So it really was Brigham Young that initially verbalized this policy. And not only that, but it limited their ability to participate in our church. We, as many of you know, have temples, and we believe we are connected to our families. That was something that they couldn't do. Because of this particular policy. In progressing years, more presidents of the church leaned into his words that he spoke and continued denying African Americans full membership until in 1978, full membership was finally restored through President Kimball. And I was going to have Stephanie talk about how what the impact of that has been on African Americans in the church, because this is where it really gets to why do we even need to reconcile?
You know, that's kind of hard for me to say. I was baptized in 1992, so it didn't affect me that much, but I heard of people who are priesthood holders or black members who wanted the priesthood. And I didn't even know there was a band, okay? And it just stunned me to learn about that in the anguish. Even in Elijah Abel's time, when they restricted their use of the priesthood holders, they had such a strong faith. They believed in the teachings that Joseph Smith rolled out, that they stayed regardless, you know. They're like, we're of God. Joseph Smith was commanded to teach all people. He said God was no respecter of people. In Galatians, Peter says God is no respecter of people. Black, white, free, slave, Jew, Gentile. So they were just great and stalwart people, and I'm so glad that I can embrace the religion that they believed in. Regardless, you don't give me the priesthood, it's okay, you know. And like I said, we had black members back there that helped the founding of our church, and they just held strong. I don't know why there was a band. I don't know if it was politics or anything like that. But sometimes, even in the Bible, people fall off, and God says, that's not what I said. Okay? Wake up. Wake up. And, you know, in 1978, they heard the Lord, and they said, you're right. All men are created equal. We all have something to contribute on this earth. And I believe in my heart that God doesn't make anything inferior. He is a God of majesty and wonder, and each and every one of us hold his spark. So my job is to get that story out about the Black Latter-day Saints, and it's just like, hey, we can do it, and we can build a powerhouse. We can be ensign to the world on how we treat each other. And I think the start of the restoration of the priesthood was that first step.
So there is a lot of pain and anguish that has been felt because of this. For decades, people were denied what we would consider necessary and important ways for us to belong to our family. And that's stinging. And it wasn't really talked about. It wasn't really discussed much. And there's much of history that you can go into surrounding this, but it was a very painful time and still continues to be painful for some people. I think, and one of the reasons when I was feeling the impression for the need for reconciliation and healing is because I could see it. I could see the pain. So obviously something needed to happen. And so, like I had explained, we started these groups just because it was more of a matter of what do we do? What do you do to reconcile?
Can I say something right here?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mean to indicate you were in Utah because you weren't, but her relatives were there. Your father was there. Your aunt was there. And one of her aunts came up to the podium to speak. You know, we all spoke a little bit. What's her name? Aunt Marion, yeah. And she was shaking the whole time. I mean, trembling, shaking. But she got it all out. And she was trying to say that there's just something really important here that we need to do. And I know that we're not all in agreement, but those of us who feel this way are going to step forward and try to make a difference. And I was so impressed with her because it was very hard for her. I mean, you know, I didn't take that exact moment to think about everything she might have felt and why, but eventually I did. And it's almost like saying the whole world says it's X and I say it's Y. And so she had the courage to do that. So even though, I mean, I'm not a Mormon, I'm just a Christian, and the same with my brother who was a Jehovah's Witness. When he died, I worked at Bryan Cave and people say, oh, is she a Jehovah's Witness? No, I'm not. But the issue of reconciliation is a universal issue. And dogma aside, they had some issues not only within the church, but within the community. So I'm still learning because I remember when they allowed the priesthood, and yet it was almost like, oh, I didn't know anybody black was in the church. So she's sharing with us that they were always, and then when I went to Utah, I saw beautiful statues, and you can share that whenever you're ready. But I just wanted to let you know that her aunt was a very brave lady who stood forward to speak for their family at that dinner, and I really still applaud her for her courage as well as I do you.
So I do attend the group weekly with her, and it's very healing because we talk about it, and it's healing because they care, and they're like, how do we fix this? And it's just good to know that there's people out there who are willing to say, no, that was wrong. Let us figure out how to fix this. And that means a lot. I mean, when somebody is willing to say, I'm sorry that happened, that wasn't me, but we're going to work on this and make this a better world.
Yeah, and I think, the groups, I've been trained in conversation and dialogue, and I work as a nurse, and so I kind of started moving into a realm of community healing anyways, and this kind of popped up as the way I knew how to do it. So we end up meeting, there's about 4 or 5 of us at a time, and like I said, we talk about various topics, various things that have to do with history, or even just like, what do we do with anger? Or those kinds of things. What do we do with these things? They're meant to allow people to listen, to learn to listen to stories, and then to speak what they feel they need to speak. It's fairly structured. It's not a debate. Nobody's trying to debate each other or prove something right or wrong. It's based on personal experience. And I would say most people who have continued going to that group have found it healing in some way, shape, or form. For, I think, everybody who has really kind of continued with it. We have people kind of come and go sometimes. But so for me, the main impact of that has been huge. We kind of talked about this idea of how we see through the glass darkly. And that, for me, has been... and I think even mentioning the fact that, Dred Scott and Brigham Young were in the same time period, and they kind of were in the same waters of racism. Mm-hmm. And to me, that is the muddy water of seeing darkly, of not seeing everything, of seeing things unclearly, of not knowing everything, of not understanding. And as we work in a group, they bring little pieces to the table of different ways of seeing, different ways of experiencing the world, different ways of understanding. And it's amazing to me how much that can broaden your understanding of the people around you, of life around you, of history, to hear different people who have experienced life differently than your own. So we're currently at the point with this group, we've been doing this now for, I think, maybe about 6-8 months, somewhere around there. And we're currently at a point where we're now at a point of like, now what? What now does reconciliation mean?
Right. Can I share this too? When I was in New York, and I told you about the play that had been revised to have all these other characters in it, and Kate Tawney is the young lady who wrote the play, and she's just amazing. I said to her, how do the black actors in this play feel about the play? Because the essence of it is that the Tawney guy was trying to fumble around and apologize to the Scott descendant, and it just wasn't going right. He just really wasn't sure how to do that. And the Tawney person was sitting there waiting to see, now what's this guy going to come up with, It was weird. But then there were other actors And when I asked her how did they feel about it, and we did a talk back after the second night, it was 2 nights when I was there. It ran from mid-March to the end of March. And she said they really embraced it to the extent that having to hear the dialogue between the two descendants who were in today's time, looking back on what happened to our ancestors, but she said they felt, back to what you were saying, it made me stop and think. It made me really deal with some of the feelings I was having. It made me, stop ignoring things and really face them. So for whatever that meant to whoever it was healing. And that's what this really ultimately is about. It's not only a between races or between sex or whatever. It's internal. It's an internal healing. Can I accept myself for who I am? Am I African American? And I don't know if I like that, because I think we got the short end of the stick. One time I asked the Lord, why do we blacks, why do we get the short end of the stick? I've never said this publicly, but I was working at Ford Motor Company, and something made me recognize, wow, some people really have it good. And I said, why do we always get the short end of the stick? And the Spirit said, because that's where you'll find me. And I saw his arm stretched out on the short end of the stick of the cross. And it really touched me. So when we look at our own healings, just like the Tawny crew did, and what I hear you saying, it's a multi-layered thing that's going to happen and happens.
Yeah, so, thank you. That is a great example, and that's exactly, I think all of us, I would imagine, and I've heard them say this, feel in some way they have learned more about themselves and who they are and how they want to move in this world. And I think the last conversation that we just had, I think we all were like, what we really realize is it's funny you say this, we're all humans, right? We all deserve dignity, but the power then of being able to say that after working through some of these hard things, to really be able to see the dignity and the humanness in everybody because you've experienced life through their eyes to some degree, I think is just a very powerful thing. So right now we're trying to figure out what next. We will continue to hold these discussions, and we'll continue to hold them with anybody who wants to come. They're done online, so. But we're also talking more about different projects that we're doing. We have a project that my Aunt Marion Marion and Carolyn, who is there too.
Yeah, that's right.
They both are working on something with another African American in Salt Lake City. That's I don't know if they're going to call it Breaking Bread, but I like that name. They're going to do dinners.
Yeah. Well, that's what Charlie Tawney calls his program, Breaking Bread. Years ago, some of you might remember that when he and I started working together, and I do travel all around the country with Charlie Tawney, and we share our stories collectively. He started something called Breaking Bread, where he just asked one man that he knew, do you know an African American, that a family, a man or a wife, that couple that we, and my wife and I, that we can meet and have over to our house for dinner. And the gentleman introduced him to someone. They came over, and they had a lovely dinner. But he said he learned something right off the bat. He figured for sure they would just be liberals and therefore probably Democrats. And he said it turns out that the wife was a Democrat, the husband was a Republican. And he would have never believed that if he hadn't heard it with his own ears. So to start right off the bat, it was like, oh, this is so different than what I thought. What else is there to learn, And so Charlie did that, and then they both invited another couple, so now there was 8 people, and then they invited more until they had to move out of the houses, and they kept that going for a little while. But it was about learning to relate. I always tell people it's the R word, not racism, relationship, and that's what people have to build, so yeah.
Yeah, that sounds exactly like what we were talking about doing. So I think I'm involved in the planning, but not as much because I'm not there. But I think they're probably going to be once a month or something, and kind of something very similar to that. Yeah, so I'm excited to see where that goes. We have LaSonia down there who is working on some stuff in winter quarters. And is it winter quarters? Yeah. And they're working on doing some stuff to honor Black pioneers. Both Dana and Stephanie here are working on. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
So we're going to have one of the professors from the University of Utah, and he just wrote this book for Deseret Book, which is a church kind of owned business. And the book is Let's Talk About Race and the Priesthood. And this book details the 3 phases of the Black Americans in the church. The start of it, when we had a bunch of Black priesthood holders. The part where it just kind of went south, and then the restoration of it. And it's really important, like you guys have history days, you have to hear these stories and be reminded of your history, the good and the bad. And right now, in my belief, this church doesn't embrace their whole history. They don't know it. Like I said, I was a member for 32 years and didn't know there was Black priesthood holders in the past. And that's because it wasn't taught to me. And so in order to, in my opinion, to get over this hump, to get past the quote, quote, racism, we need to know the history and not say, oh, you just gave the priesthood to the Blacks in 1978. No, it wasn't that. It was restored. And our founder believed in all races.
Yeah, so they're doing that.
Can you share the difference between, and both of you hold your mics a little closer too.
Okay.
Can you share the difference between Brigham Young and Joseph Smith, just a little more succinctly, because I'm not sure
Okay.
that they
So
quite
Joseph
get that.
Smith founded the church. He preached the gospel, and honestly, most of the troubles probably came from the fact that, you know, he honored the Black race. He was eventually killed. The Mormons were chased through the state of Missouri, Illinois, and other parts, and that's how they wound up in Utah. So he was the founding prophet. When he was killed, then the prophet mantle was passed on. So the beginning of the church, we always had a prophet, you know, so unfortunately the first prophet was killed. He's the only one that I know of, but that's what happened.
And so Brigham Young was the second. So he's the one, once they left Missouri, they went to Utah. He was the leader at that time, built Salt Lake City for, you know, those who are curious, and really established what is now known as the Intermountain West, the culture there, and a lot that.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that Joseph Smith, the founder, allowed Black priests and Black people, and he had pioneers, and we saw statues of their pioneers, which was really amazing to even know and see. And then Brigham Young came, but then he didn't want them, and there were issues. And so we're looking at reconciling beyond what Brigham Young brought to the
Yeah,
church.
and there's history with Brigham Young too, because I think he started out more accepting, and then as time went on, he really was the one that kind of first said, yeah, Blacks can't have.
See, that's like Tawny. Tawny used to, in fact, I'll say this, it's said that if he had not done the Dred Scott decision, he might have gone down in history as one of the better Chief Justices of our Supreme Court, but he's known for Dred Scott. So at the same time as what you're saying, he defended slaves. He used to actually, you know, as a lawyer, but over time, something changed. So in both cases, it didn't go very well. So here we sit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, we have 10 minutes left, and if there's something else you guys want to add, please do. But if not, if you have questions, we'd be happy to try to answer them. And we appreciate you staying. I know it's a long day on Saturday, and we've never been at 4:30 before. Hint, hint. Where are you? But anyway, we're happy to be here. So, any questions at all? Yes, dear. Who are you addressing this to, please? Any of us? Okay.
If there's just one word that you use to
Acknowledgement is actually what Charlie Tawney dwells on, acknowledging that this man said some crazy stuff back in the day, and here it is, and he'll read it for you so you can hear it, and then he tells you, you know, his perspective on it. So acknowledgement really is, and there is a formula for this as well. So that is clearly one of the first things that has to happen. I'm going to just say communication, because after that you have to communicate and get the facts straight. So.
I was going to say conversation, talk, and listen. That is integral. And I really stress debate is not the way to go about doing this. It's really about sharing storytelling. So that communication aspect of it is big.
So I think acknowledgement is the first step. But after that, brotherly love, you know? And when you, especially when you get to know people, conversations, you grow closer. But acknowledge it and say, I'm going to love you instead of it.
You know, if I can just tag on to that, because I think it just needs to be said, but one of the issues that Charlie and I talk about is, you know, I have to look out. I see a lot of familiar faces, but there's always some new ones. Charlie Tawney actually did 2 apologies to our family, which neither he nor I felt we had to have, but he spontaneously did it the first time, and the second time he did it in front of the statue of his ancestor 2 weeks or 3 before they took the statue of Tawney down. And he said to me some words, you know, and he said, will you forgive me? And forgiveness is the rest of the equation. Because people can come to you all day long, but if you don't accept and receive that, and of course I did, and I believe this is actually probably out on YouTube somewhere. You can probably Google it and find it. But this is a formulaic thing. It is a process, and it's the steps, and you have to take each one in its course. But ultimately, love is at the core of it. And I think that's what makes it easier for me, is because if you have love in your heart, then that's going to be on the table while you're talking, you know? So we could preach on that all day, but we won't. But thank you for that wonderful question. It opened up a lot of thoughts that needed to be said in this conversation. Thank you. Yes, here.
This was something that you said, just to kind of tag on to that. I really appreciated talking about the self-evaluation and self-realization and on the multiple levels.
Yes.
I think even more so today, and with the younger generation, we're such a press button, internet, everything's in our hands, and we can control so much instantly. We forget the process and the steps that we go along. And something I learned as an adult that my late mother taught me as an adult was before each meal, she said that she wasn't even necessarily praying, she was just taking a breath, to not rush through the meal, to just sit and digest the day before digesting the meal and thinking about what had happened through the day and taking that on that multi-level. And it's not all going to happen right now in one chunk. That you're going to take these little pieces and take the time to sit back and let it sink in so you don't knee-jerk everything like we do in the palms of our hands. So I just wanted to say I just really appreciate that perspective from you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for elaborating on it, because that was really well said too. Yeah, every bite. You know how they used to say, chew each bite 32 times? Yeah. I don't think so. Nobody does that, but we should do that in life. Thank you. All right. Yes.
I just wanted to, I guess, ask Rachel a little bit to elaborate, as I've been a part of her reconciliation group from the beginning. When she first started, was invited to that. As a Black Latter-day Saint myself, I had a hard time. I was struggling when I came to the group. And I grew
Represent.
yes, to make this amend or to start this
Yeah.
process. And so maybe she can elaborate.
Did you want me to share a little bit about that? Yeah. Yeah. So, part of when I talk about impressions that I received, it felt deeply ancestral. I don't know how to explain it. Whatever, I don't know, whatever else people may believe or not believe, it felt like my family was speaking to me. Just a deep connection there with that. So I think that was something that I was trying to make sense of at the time and continue to try and make sense of, in the sense that I wonder how much even some of this work that is being done now has to do with just our own connection to our family that has come before us. And however you want to frame that in a belief set, I think there can be lots of various ways to make sense of that. But for me, there was an ancestral connection to that.
Okay, excellent. Well, our time is rolling to an end, and I want to thank both of you for making the trip here and for sharing a difficult story. You know, most of these have their areas of difficulty, but you're handling it with grace, and I thank you for that. And the last thing I will do, which I never do, but it's so shameless, it's that Dred Scott is in Chesterfield Mall, and we're leaving in August because they're tearing down the mall. So we haven't had, or we won't have a space. But if you find a way that you might want to contribute to us, we're having a fundraising day in St. Louis where all nonprofits are online at Give STL Day St. Louis, and we'd appreciate it if you could support us. That's all. But thank you for having us yet again. This is our 17th year, I do believe, and thank my daughter for holding down the fort last year. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you, ladies. I know they'd love to visit with you, and if you'll give us just a moment, we'll set up for Cindy Wilson's remarks.